Hi, Scalable Investors. Today I have with me Paul Moore. Paul is the founder of Wellings Capital, where he runs three different funds and has a wide variety of different experiences. He's also the co-host of two podcasts and has done a lot of things before founding Wellings Capital, but I don't want to steal his thunder. So why don't we just jump into things a little bit? Paul, how are you doing today?
Hey, it's great. Great to be here, Mason. Thank you. I'm doing great.
Sure. Well, we're excited to have you. Well, how about we just do that? Not everyone is necessarily familiar with your background, so why don't we get into
Sure.
that and how you got into real estate and where you came from?
You bet. So I sold my company to a publicly traded firm in 1997, started buying, as they called them at the time, fixer-uppers on the courthouse steps. That later changed into flips as this whole space got a lot more popular. But ended up building some modular homes. And I found out something that if you don't know how to tighten the doorknob on your own home, you probably shouldn't build a house from the ground up. I don't know about you, but just thought that that was probably a good learning lesson. And one of the reasons I started a podcast called How to Lose Money, but that was years later. Anyway, so we also flipped some waterfront lots. And I, over the years, wondered how to get involved in commercial real estate, how to be more scalable, and I didn't know how to do that. But we finally built a multifamily facility in North Dakota, and we owned and operated that for a number of years. And after a while, years into that, I ended up writing a book called The Perfect Investment about multifamily investing. But I found out later it wasn't so perfect if you can't find deals that make economic sense. And multifamily space had gotten so overheated that I actually branched out into self-storage and mobile home parks. And that's what led us to eventually do these three funds that we have now.
Okay, that's really interesting you say that because that's also what I noticed as I started to research multifamily syndications. It just felt like there was a lot of people doing it, and it's great that it changes so many lives. But at the same time, I've had experience with different asset classes that you know the prices can only get so high and the margins can get so thin, and then it's like I might as well just buy an ETF and sit back and collect some dividends on a stock or something, which is obviously not our goal
Right,
as real estate investors.
right.
So I noticed in your bio you had mentioned you had gone from say 1.5 million in the bank to 2.5 in debt, and then back up to debt free. So how did you experience these wild swings?
Yeah, so in 97, we sold our company. I had a little over 1.5 million in the bank. 10 years later to the month, I had 2.5 million in debt. And it was all against single family and residential and single family lots at a resort area. And about that time, my business partner said, "Hey, I'm going to hand all these assets over to you because I can't afford the half payment on the debt anymore." So I ended up getting stuck with all that debt. And in late 1997, excuse me, late 2007, we had no idea about the black hole we were about to hurtle down as real estate investors. We were hoping that the worst was over, and those were just the cracks in the ice. Of course, we didn't know that at the time, looking forward. So my family and I made a radical decision that we were going to start giving our way out of debt. And the way we did that is we picked some nonprofits, church, et cetera, that we really felt passionate about, and we began to give a set monthly amount, excuse me, weekly amount every week. And we began to do that knowing that, how much worse can it get than we already are? It was pretty bad. And so we actually began to do that. 4 weeks into that, I had a light bulb idea, and it took a lot of work, but over the next 13 months, right in the heart of the Great Recession, we were able to get completely out of debt and even pay off our house.
Okay, so by giving to local charities and things like this, how does that get you out of debt? It seems counterintuitive
It
to,
does, doesn't it? Well,
yeah.
I really, I really believe, that there's a great universal principle of sowing and reaping, or some people in other, parts of the world or other places might call it karma. And so basically, I really do believe that you get back if you give. And I don't think it's automatic. I don't think there's some vending machine in the ground or in the sky that automatically gives you back. But I think as a general principle, it opens up your mind and allows you to tap into ideas and strategies and to meet people that you wouldn't have otherwise met and things like that. So I can't prove it, but I absolutely believe it. And I've seen it work many, many times in many people's lives.
Okay, so through your contributions, you met some other folks that were able to present opportunities that got you out of debt?
Yeah, I just think it's sort of, again, it's sort of an ethereal universal principle that, the doors begin. It's like that commitment principle, about burning the ships, right? I might get this wrong. I really might. But I think it was Cortez or somebody who burned the ships in the harbor. And he said, we're not going back. We're not going back to Spain. We're going forward and we're going to win. And what's that same kind of principle? Once you make a commitment to something, doors begin to open. And that's what I'm talking about. It's sort of a supernatural thing I'm talking about right now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that was Hernan Cortez. Sounds
Yeah.
right. Got to check. I love history, but got to double check that one.
Okay.
So you mentioned you left multifamily syndications because it just didn't any longer reach economical sense to do it. The numbers didn't work. And so how did you start to get up to speed on these different asset classes like self-storage?
Yeah, so I met somebody named Chris Benson. Chris helped me tremendously learn about self-storage. He was another multifamily syndicator who had moved over to storage. I read a few books that were out there. There's not a whole lot out there. I actually went to a weekend seminar 2 or 3 different times by a guy named Scott Myers. Scott Myers has wonderful training on self-storage. I got to know people in that realm. I started visiting self-storage facilities with operators, and learning about them. And so that's how I got up to speed in self-storage and in mobile home parks.
Okay, so really just connecting with people that are already in the space. And
Right.
did you join any mastermind groups or mentorship programs?
No, I didn't actually officially join Scott Myers, although I did go to 1 or 2 of their events, and he actually let me. I actually spoke at one of his events on capital raising, and so I got to go to the mastermind free. I got to meet some people that I'm still in touch with 2 years later.
Okay, so starting to draw some of those benefits without having to pay
Yeah.
the higher fees. I think his were on the higher end. I can't remember exactly, but
Yeah,
not cheap.
Scott's got some great stuff. I can't think of anybody who does a better job with their mastermind, their training, and everything they do than Scott. Really admire him. There's some other folks in the mobile home park space named Frank and Dave. They also have some really great training in that realm as well. We all know that the multifamily world is awash in wonderful mentoring, training, and masterminds. There's so many options now.
Yeah. What do you mean by a wash?
There's just so many options. I mean, if you want to get involved in a multifamily mastermind coaching or training program, you could probably pick from 10 or 15, and there may be whole lots more that I don't even know about. So
Hmm.
multifamily just become so popular over the last decade.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I firmly agree with that. And I think mentally it's easy to transition from like a single family resident to
Yeah,
multifamily.
that's right.
So
I had never thought of that, but I think you're absolutely right. That's a
yeah.
natural progression, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I know I started out with 2 single family houses, and then I also learned about passively investing in multifamily syndications. And then as I learned more, I started to just become a lot more interested in other asset classes in the
Yeah,
commercial real estate side that I really previously wasn't aware of.
yeah,
So, but
yes.
multifamily is a good gateway, a gateway drug,
Yeah,
so to
right,
speak.
right. No kidding.
And
A lot of people, almost everybody in self storage and mobile home parks were in multifamily at one time, and almost everybody in all 3 asset classes had done single family at some point.
right. On mobile home parks, it's interesting you mentioned those. It's definitely an interesting asset class. I've heard though that there's been some cap rate compression there as well from these folks that are leaving the multifamily. Has that been your experience?
It's absolutely true.
Okay.
If you go through training, for example, in mobile homes, The training manuals will say, you're looking for a 12 or 14 cap rate deal, and this actually might be worth 9 or 10 cap. Well, the truth is now you're looking for a 9 or 10 cap, and it might be worth like 6 cap. When I say worth, I mean you might be able to buy it because it's run down, it's mismanaged. You might be able to quickly get it up to where it's worth a much higher cap rate. There's a massive difference in the value of a 10 cap and a 6 cap property. And so it's actually quite a way to raise the value of your equity and your wealth by being able to effectively lower the cap rate on a property.
Okay, and it's the same methods in terms of just increasing NOI and properly managing the property and increasing occupancy and all of that.
Yeah, in a residential property, just for your audience sake here, if you buy a $500,000 home and you put $500,000 more into it, you got $1 million in it, but it's in a $500,000 neighborhood, you're probably not going to get your $1 million back out of it. But in a commercial property, if you can increase the net operating income, and if you can find a way to compress the cap rate, which you can't always do, you can dramatically, it's just math at that point. It's not based on a neighborhood or the competitors or what it costs to build or insure, the appraisal or the assessments, none of that. It's based on math, and it's very predictable. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering though, are you primarily focusing on multiple home parks in more rural areas, or how close do you get to the major MSA center point?
Well, Mason, some of the mobile home parks are right, on the edge of a city. We looked at one last week that was butting right up against the city line. Now, it was only an area of 99,000 people. The city limits itself only had 34,000 people. But there are mobile home parks, inside the city limits of large cities, including places like Dallas or Houston. And so, yeah, it could be anywhere. Self-storage, we like the opportunity to be in a tertiary market. Like, we might, like if we were in your area, we might not want to be so much in Dallas. We might want to be in McKinney, or maybe even an hour outside of McKinney. There's a place called Beeville, Texas. You might not even heard of it. It's not that far from you, but it's a very small town. We know we're not going to get any competitors, and we've been able to raise the value. Our operating partner has raised the value of that property from 2.3 million to almost 5 million in a little over a year. And that's, again, just based on the math.
It's definitely impressive, and it's my strategy as well, is kind of focusing on towns I never heard of before, and
Right.
trying to get in those tertiary markets. Was that a new build, or did you buy an existing facility in that smaller town?
So what happened is our operating partner had, what had happened is the parents apparently had passed away, and there were 5 kids, and they sold it. And apparently, again, it was probably priced right for what it was, but our operator was able to go in and dramatically upgrade it. And again, since he's my operating partner, I don't know all the details of what he did, but he probably decreased delinquency, probably raised rents 20 or 30% to bring them up to the normal market value. He probably added U-Haul, which adding U-Haul alone can increase your net operating income and your value of the property significantly. And it's just a signature on a paper and shuffling a few trucks into the lot,
Yeah, it's definitely something I've been interested in. Is I know you can also sell like insurance to the tenants
Yeah.
as they're signing up for units, but
Right.
can you go into a little more detail on the U-Haul? Like, you obviously have to communicate with U-Haul themselves, and what's the process like?
Yeah, let's do the math on this. So basically you sign up to be a U-Haul management, I don't know what you call it exactly, a U-Haul affiliate, that's it. And you get commission from the trucks that are rented out of your location. So let's do the math on this. Let's say you bought a $2 million self-storage facility, you had $1 million in debt and $1 million in equity. And now let's say you could go in and you're in a decent location, you can typically get 2 to 5,000 a month in commission from U-Haul. Let's just use a higher side number of $4,000 a month you can add in U-Haul commission. Multiply that by 12 months, that's $48,000 obviously. Now remember our formula, value is net operating income divided by cap rate. Let's assume that there's a 6% cap rate. So you divide that 48,000 in new income divided by 0.06. Look what you just did. You just added $800,000 to the value of that facility. Well, the banker doesn't get to share in that. That $800,000 goes to the equity holders. Well, if you had $1 million in debt and $1 million in equity, just by signing that paper and starting that process with U-Haul, at least on paper, you just increase the value of your equity by 80% from $1 million up to $1.8 million. Even if you sold it, you know, I mean, you want a little bit of time under your belt, but even if you sold it soon and did nothing else, you just had a huge win there. That's a big value add, I'm telling you.
Yeah, I agree. Would you say that U-Hauls are one of the best additional income strategies?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because there's no capital expense. And if you've already got a facility large enough to have a full-time manager, you're really not generally adding any cost at all. They're already working anyway. You might have to pay them a few extra hours here and there. But yeah, I think it's one of the best ways to quickly add value to a property.
Okay. And so you said there's no capital investment, and so U-Haul's just providing these trucks. You just go to their lot and pick them up. Huh.
No, they bring them to you.
Oh, even better. So there's
Yeah, they have a regional manager who shuffles, a logistics manager who shuffles these trucks around.
Okay. Definitely gonna have to look into that. And I guess you just need enough space to store
Yeah.
them and
Mhm.
maybe do like a cost benefit analysis on, well, I could have RV parking storage and boat storage or U-Haul storage.
Right. Yeah, you're definitely going to want to have some room out front to make sure that the U-Hauls are very visible. But yeah, no, it's a great way. A lot of the employees don't love it because they'd rather not have to do the extra work of sweeping these out. But generally, it's a great win.
Okay. I've heard of some operators using like a one person boots on the ground just a maintenance guy to check out the property once a week, for example. But on your facilities, do you have like a full-time staff that would sweep out the U-Hauls, for example?
Yeah. Excuse me. The any facility that has more than about excuse me 30,000 or 35,000 square feet, which might be 300 or 350 units in a typical self-storage, would have the ability to support a full-time staff. There are automated ways of doing it, but I believe in general, though I could be proven wrong by somebody, I believe in general you get much better upsells and much better profitability by having a staff person there who can sell locks, boxes, tape, scissors, insurance, upsell the unit size, maybe offer a special concession, greet the person face to face. It's a better way to go. However, with all the stuff that's happening in COVID here, a lot of the automated facilities have done really well as well.
Yeah, I see on Sparefoot, they're really advertising contactless facility and
Yeah,
checks the box and all that.
right.
Is that some of the advertising you do? Do you use Sparefoot or any other platforms?
Yeah, our operators use Sparefoot, and there is a new group that's just kind of getting rolling here. It's a bunch of independent operators who use a co-op method for advertising, and they share software, they share marketing ideas, they share advertising, they do a whole lot of Google AdWords and Facebook ads, etc. together. It's a co-op that allows these independent marketers to compete with the big REITs like Public Storage, Life Storage, Extra Space, etc.
Okay, interesting. So AdWords, Facebook, all of it really that you need.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Great. What's the name of that again?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me because I'm drawing a blank on that right now, Mason.
Oh,
But, maybe by the end of the show, I'll remember.
okay, that's fine. Yeah, and if not, then later on, we can always put it in the episode description, which
When I
hopefully our listeners are checking out because I always put all these helpful links in there for each episode. So
when I remember, I'm going to interrupt you and yell it out, and you'll probably think I'm crazy, but there you go.
that's fine as long as we get it.
Yeah,
it's
right.
like it's like catching a mouse or something. Just got to jump on it. All right. Um, so on another note, changing gears a little bit, I noticed that you had mentioned that you had some tax strategies that every commercial real estate investor should be aware of that maybe your CPA isn't actually utilizing, and they're just maybe filling out forms for you. So could you go into a little bit more of that?
Oops, I turned my mic off. Yes. Yeah, so there's so many amazing tax strategies. So I know a guy named Ed who actually sat down with his CPA, and after about 10 years of paying 100 to 120,000 a year in taxes and thinking it was normal, he said, "Hey, have you heard of this strategy or this or this?" And the CPA said, "Yep, sure have, sure have." And he said, "Well, why didn't you tell me about this?" And the CPA said, "Well, you paid me to do your taxes, not be a tax strategist." And of course, that was the last lunch they ever had together. And he fired that CPA and he hired a CPA who would be a tax strategist, someone who would help him get to the very bottom of the very best strategies he could use to minimize taxes. By the way, that organization, that third party group, was called Store Local. Store Local. And I actually was able to ask my business partner real quick on Slack. So anyway, but some of those strategies would, of course, include a 1031 exchange. We all know that. Sometimes you can exchange into a Delaware statutory trust, which we don't have time to get into now, but it's a strategy I love. Another strategy is cost segregation, which allows you to accelerate the depreciation. And so by accelerating depreciation on a self-storage, apartment building, mobile home park, you can often compress 15 or 27 and a half or 38 or 39 years of depreciation all into the first year. And so by doing that, in conjunction with the December 2017 Tax and Jobs Act, it's really very, very helpful to increase the paper losses that investors get on their K1. You have to be a direct owner to do that. And so getting a K1 instead of getting a 1099 would be the key to knowing if you're really a direct owner. If you've invested in a syndication, you should be one of those. There's other strategies using Section 179 to make sure, that all of your costs that are truly repairs are deducted in that year, for example, or to take certain capital expenses and push them into that first year rather than out over 15 years. There's lots of things like that. Of course, I mentioned the 1031, but at the end of the line, if you have 1031 exchange 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 times over the years and you pass away holding an asset, your heirs can reset the basis on that asset. And if they sell it the next day or the next year, they will have an increased basis, and therefore they will never have to pay all those massive capital gains and depreciation recapture taxes that you would have owed if you'd have sold it right before you passed away. So very powerful strategies.
Okay, and that last one that's the one under Section 179?
The last one I mentioned was reset basis at death.
Okay. Huh, very interesting. Oh, I was wondering how cost segregation analysis will differ between like a multifamily property that has a lot more components than like self-storage or mobile home parks.
Yeah, so in order, I would say mobile home parks have by far the most tax advantaged cost segregation opportunities. And then I'd say apartments second, and then I'd say self-storage third. For time's sake, I'll just tell you that one reason self-storage is less is what you said, that there's less components. There's less carpet and lighting fixtures and electrical fixtures and landscaping and things like that to offset that you would have in, say, an apartment. Mobile home parks have even more because a lot of a mobile home park is infrastructure and goodwill, which can be accelerated. Mobile home parks and multifamily also have a basic 27 and a half year time frame where self-storage has either, I can't remember if it's 38 or 39 for commercial properties. So yeah, I'd say that in order, those are how I'd rank those three, but I'm not a tax professional.
Okay, of course. But so even like with self-storage at the lowest ranking, would you say it's still worth it to hire a guy to go out
Oh,
there and do it?
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How much are you saving usually when you do that? Or how much do you pay the guy to do the analysis and how much in taxes are you usually saving on like one property?
Yeah, you can do an inexpensive analysis for a few $1,000s, and then you can also, a typical analysis is maybe $5,000 to $8,000. Then you can do an engineering cost segregation study, which is much, much more detailed, where they pretty much come in and count every nut and bolt and light switch and everything. I mean, in great detail. And those are typically $12,000 or more. And they claim they are able to get more defensible savings than others, but that remains to be seen. A typical result of a cost segregation study might be that you were able to write off, for example, an apartment building, maybe 25%, maybe 30% of the cost of the building, not the land, but the building. You might be able to accelerate that into, maybe a 1, 3, 5 year bucket, which under the new tax law accelerates everything into year one. In a mobile home park, you might be able to accelerate 70% of the value of the mobile home park. 30% will be land, 70% the building, the infrastructure, the few buildings you might have, the parking lot, the electrical, the utilities, the, tennis court, whatever, all that stuff can be accelerated. And then in self-storage, I would guess maybe 15 to 20% can be accelerated. And then the rest is, again, on a high 30-year, 38 or 39-year basis, which makes the weighted average acceleration a little less than those other types.
Okay, so just to clarify, I've taken some accounting classes and it was a major accounting and finance in college, but the specific depreciation methods in like an actual practical world sense, I want to understand this a little better. So when you're recognizing that accelerated depreciation upfront, for the subsequent years, you say like over a 30-year period, is that just on a straight line basis or can you stagger it?
For the subsequent years, help me out with that a little bit. What do you mean?
So by year one, you can recognize a lot of the depreciation up front, which is great because of the time value of money and everything. But
Right.
say year 2, 3, say you have a 5-year holding period and year 2, 3, 4, how do those look? Are they staggered down or is it straight line so they're constant every year on
So what
years 2
happens
through?
is if you get 5 or 6 or 7% cash flow, and then you're getting a 25% loss, well, you can't use all that loss unless you're a QREP, which is a qualified real estate professional, which is another tax strategy, by the way. But assuming you can't use all that loss, it'll be forwarded into the coming years. So if you can use, let's say you're getting a return of 7% a year and you get 28% of that accelerate into year one, well, that's 4 years you're going to be at a zero taxable income because 4 times 7 is 28. But in addition to that, you would get the straight line component. And let's say for self-storage, that's an additional, again, let's assume the land is worth 25% of the value. So if it's 75% total, let's say you wrote off 25% of the building up front, you still have 50% on a 38-year basis. So that's something like, what's that, like 1.6% a year you can also take in depreciation straight line over the full, I believe it's 39 years.
Okay. I think that answer my question. So you have like the straight line component and then you also have any carry forward as well.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Got it. All right. That makes a lot of sense. And something that we should all be looking into. And in terms of like finding these tax strategists, CPAs, or the cost seg analysis analyst, what's the best way to do that, you think? Just
I
ask
think
around?
I'd go on Bigger Pockets and ask on the forum there. Tell them you're in a certain location and you're looking for a cost seg analyst in those areas. As far as CPAs, I would really consider a national search because you might find a CPA in Scottsdale, Arizona, who's much, much better than anybody in the real estate realm in your town. And it might be worth it to get that out-of-state person who knows the laws and who has a creative, strategic mindset far more than anybody you might find locally.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And depending on the state, you may not even reach the threshold to pay taxes on a state level. So it's
Yeah,
just
right.
federal.
Yeah, right. If people want to reach out to me, I can give a list of a very short list of some tax strategists that we've used and we like.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that was one of my next questions. I know we're running short on time since you have another call after this one. So one thing I wanted to ask you briefly hit on it was the name of your podcast. You're the host of two, The Art of Investing and then How to Lose Money. So could you revisit that one more time real quickly? Why is it called How to Lose Money?
Yeah, so for years I would go to these conferences or events and people would be up there bragging about their successes and they were real. I mean, I was really impressed. But a lot of people in the audience just went home with their heads hung low. I could watch them and they would say things like, "Oh, I'll never get there. I'll never be as lucky as that guy. I'll never make those connections. I'll never make that much money." And the truth is, those people on stage had the same setbacks, the same discouragements, the same insecurities and fears that the people in the audience felt, but they didn't share them. And as I got into a place where I was one of those speakers, I realized, I want to share the setbacks, the pain, the losses on the road to success. And what we found is that it encourages people and gives them great hope when they realize, oh, I'm not alone.
Okay, that's great. I'll put the link to both of those podcasts in the episode description, and it is definitely encouraging. I'm actually reading a book. I can post the link in the episode description as well. I forget the name of it, but it's very interesting. One chapter says that you have these great successes like Bill Gates or other billionaires, and what happens is often in the media they erase the brush strokes and they erase how did they get there. So that's
So
definitely
true.
encouraging.
It's so true. Every successful person I know has had massive failure along the way.
Yeah, and all the more reason to just keep pushing, but in a
That's
smart
right.
way, smart direction.
Yeah,
All right.
right.
So, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to connect more?
Yeah, they can just come to my website, which is wellingscapital.com. That's WELLINGSCAPITAL, wellingscapital.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, I know you got to get going. So, again, thank you for your time and hope to do this some more. Really would like to flesh out some more of those asset classes you've been involved in. And when we have more time next time. Thanks
Okay,
again.
Mason, I've really enjoyed the time together, and let's schedule another time and we'll just dive in a little deeper on self-storage or do something else. That'd be amazing.
All right, perfect. Thanks.
Thanks, Mason.